Exodus chapter 14 has 3 verses. Each of those verses has 72 words. If you take each of those verses and put them one underneath each other and read them long ways, you get the 72 names for God. Pretty amazing stuff, eh? Even in Hebrew, that the word father has 3 letters, the word mother 41. Add those together, it's 44, which is the word child. And when you take the Garden of Eden and the serpent and divide one by the other, you get pi. Where did all this stuff come from? I'm Mike Handcock and welcome to our Ancient Wisdom series. And today we're going to be talking about the secrets of Egypt. Now, if you've ever been to Egypt, and most people are outstanding and just taking photos of the pyramids and the temples and, wonder how they did all of this without the invention of the wheel, which they actually got from one of the cultures from the Middle East, and they didn't have it for the first 1500 years. How did they do all this? Well, today we're going to uncover and unpack some of the secrets of Egypt and share with you very, very different light and a very, very different way of what they did all the way over here in this magical land here in Egypt. Egypt itself, whilst it's quite a big country, is actually a very small country because it really only exists on 10 kilometres either side of the Nile River, all the way from where the Nile starts up in Sudan and into Ethiopia, right down to where it hits the Mediterranean at Alexandria. But when you come to Cairo for the first time and you get to Giza and you see the magnificent structures of the 3 pyramids there, which is what most people go to see, the first thing you think is that there possibly are only 3 pyramids. That's not true. In fact, within the Memphis Giza region, the Cairo region, there are in fact 7 pyramids. And those 7 pyramids are very set out to astrology and the way in which time was in the world many, many years ago. Those 7 pyramids also represent the 7 chakras of our body. The red chakra, the sacral, then the orange chakra, which is here, then the yellow chakra, which is the solar plexus, the green, which is the heart, the blue, the throat, and then the indigo, which is the 3rd eye, and the violet, which is the crown chakra. So all of those are bringing different energies, and they bring different energies to what happens there. One of them is even an open pyramid. It doesn't have a top on it. So it's very, very different. But let's talk about the main one, the one that you're interested in, which is the Pyramid of Giza. Giza Pyramid, in fact, was said to be built by the king Khufu, and it's often called Cheops as well. But in fact, what they relate that to, and the Egyptologists relate that to, is one little carving that they found inside the pyramid with Khufu's image on it. Apart from that, there's no inscription on it. And if you've ever been to the Valley of the Kings in Luxor, where all of the tombs are, the first thing you'll notice is the amazing hieroglyphs there telling the story of the kings and everything. There are no hieroglyphs within the pyramids whatsoever. In fact, the sarcophagus in the pyramids as well isn't brought in, it's actually set there in the ground in the Great Pyramid. And when you look at this and start to do some of the numbers on it, you'll find some amazing things. Firstly, let me share with you the way our world actually works. You see, the way our Earth spins here, it doesn't spin on an axis normally like our little globe is here. It's actually got a wobble to it. Most of us know that. So at one point in time, the North Pole is here, and at another point in time, the North Pole is over here, depending on what time it is in history. And this is called the precession of the equinoxes. And it's the reason why that when you look up into the night sky, that the stars seem to swirl around you. And that precession of the equinoxes has some very, very specific numbers in it. 12, 30, 72, which relates very much to our story of the Exodus there. Then we have 108, then we have 216, and these are relationships that go on and on and on, and the most significant one is 432. Or you can put zeros behind them, like 43,200, which is the number of seconds in daylight and the number of seconds in night time at the equinoxes when we have 12 exact hours of each. So here's some interesting relationships with the Great Pyramid for you. Firstly, it is built with all of the golden means in it. It's built with pi in it. And pi, which we relate to Pythagoras, who was born around the late 500 BCs, came much, much later. Yet it has that relationship in it. Pythagoras himself will say that he learnt that relationship from the priests of Egypt when he lived in the mystery schools in Heliopolis during his early lifetime. But that relationship, when you look at the Great Pyramid and you look at, say, the base of the Great Pyramid here, and you measure that base around, and you take that base and you divide that base by the circumference of our Earth here, and you put in the relationship 43,200. So here's our Earth. Its circumference divided by 43,200 is the exact size of the base of the Great Pyramid. And its polar radius, which is the distance between here and here on our planet, divided by 43,200, is the exact height, 483 feet, of the Great Pyramid. So the Great Pyramid of Egypt is an exact representation of the northern hemisphere of the Earth. Also, if you read a book about it, you'll understand that from a guy called Christopher Dunn, who talks about the Giza power plant. And what he says agrees with what I'm saying as well, is that there was never any pharaoh or king buried in that Great Pyramid, or any of the other pyramids for that matter. But what did go on there was an alchemical transition. What it was, we don't know. I'll let you guess that one. Could it have been to make gold? Could it have been to create power? Could it have been to do something entirely different? Well, when you go into the Great Pyramid, to me it looks very much like a power plant. The King's Chamber, which is the place about halfway up the pyramid where the sarcophagus is, which is the most incredible granite sarcophagus brought in. The granite is brought in from many, many miles away. It's brought in from part of Luxor, which is in fact hundreds of miles away. It resonates with the perfect tone A. A guy called Tom Danley did some experiments on that, going right back. He's from NASA, going right back about 30 years ago. We redid those experiments twice, once in 2008 and once in 2014 in that place as well. It's also a crystal structure around that, which resonates in F sharp, which is the note of the Earth itself. It's the resonant energy of the Earth itself. And A is one of the harmonic tones for F sharp. So to me, it's like a giant musical instrument. It's like me picking up that guitar there and actually playing that. You would hear it and it's in tune and it's a melody. There have been shafts that come into that pyramid from both sides. At certain times during history, they point directly at Sirius. So the key here is that what Dunn is saying is that liquid was poured down these shafts, a chemical reaction happened within that King's Chamber, and then going down something called the Grand Gallery, which is massive. It's like 20 metres above you in height, and it's a place that you walk down about 40 metres down the pyramid. There were Helmholtz resonators that actually powered the place. And he claims to have found some of this stuff, not in the pyramid where everybody else looks, but around it. But for me, the key is when the technology was built. Because I don't believe for 1 minute that Khufu had the ability to actually build this, nor is it documented at any stage that he actually did this. The pyramid itself and the Sphinx, which sits in front of it, points to an earlier time. You see, the Sphinx is a lion, and during the age of Leo, it pointed directly at the horizon where the sign of Leo came up in front of it. And many of the ancient cultures actually paid respect to the star sign at the time? Why do you think the symbol for Christianity is a fish? It's because it was during the age of Pisces, which age is 2,160 years, by the way, given the precession of the equinoxes. So, the Egyptians prayed to the ram. So Aries, there's a lot of ram statues in Egypt. But the Sphinx and the pyramids date back to an earlier time. Robert Bauval in 1993 wrote a book called The Orion Mystery, which played a new part on the pyramids. And what he said is that the pyramids on the Giza Plateau are a direct representation of the stars of the belt of Orion, directly above them. But that only occurred at one time in history, and that time was 10,450 BC, when you would have been standing beneath the Sphinx's paws looking directly out, and the sign of Leo there was on the horizon. And if you look at the engraving between the Sphinx's paws, which you can't get to today, it's cordoned off, it translates to Zep-Zeti. This is the place of the first time. So, folks, maybe the pyramids are a little bit older than the Egyptologists told you. And in a culture that didn't even have the wheel, they were able to move 200-ton blocks of stone, of which there are only a handful of cranes on Earth that can do that today. How did they do it? We'll find out maybe after the break.
We don't do travel, we do profound life experiences. Welcome to Soul Journeys Travel. For more than 10 years, we have led groups of conscious individuals to some of the most exotic ancient sites on Earth. Machu Picchu and Incan empires, Egyptian gods and the pyramids, Mayan prophecies, Viking adventures, On the Trail of the Templars, and even Asia's first spiritual cruise are just some of the spectacular individually crafted tours run here at Soul Journeys. Not only will you experience ancient wonders and sights your eyes have waited a lifetime for, our leaders will help you experience sacred circles, past life experiences, inner journeys, and de-engineering of your human programs that will assist you in overcoming undercurrents and blind spots that have held you back in your life. You will experience a deep and true wisdom, and at Soul Journeys, we share the alternative archeology and research completed by our leaders that will help you understand that much of what you have learned and have been conditioned with is a lie, allowing you to make better and more informed personal decisions in your life from then on. Some of our clients have done up to 8 journeys with us. Why, you may ask? Because at Soul Journeys, we design personal and intimate journeys for your soul to magical ancient sites around the world, coupled with brilliant leadership, wisdom, and coaching. Join us and have a profound life experience. Go to www.rockyourlife.net and click on Soul Journeys.
Hi there, and welcome back to our Ancient Wisdom series, The Secrets of Egypt. So how did they build those big pyramids? Well, nobody truly knows the secret to it, and many have tried. But there is some proof that it's been done more recently. In fact, during the 1940s, there's documented evidence and some photos on the internet of monks in Tibet moving very, very large stones simply through using sound. You know when an opera singer sings and you see that glass sort of going and the glass breaks? It's a very similar technology to that. But can you move a 200-ton rock with just sound? Possibly not. Or maybe with not sound that we have today in our world. But a guy by the name of Ed Leadbeater, who is an American, in the late 60s and early 70s, built a structure on his 20-acre farm in Florida. It's called the Coral Castle. And what he did is he didn't have 200-ton rocks, he had 20-ton rocks. And it was well known that Ed would go out night after night after night and work on this castle on his property. He was very secretive, nobody knew what he was doing, but what they did know, and what is well documented from his neighbours and people around the area, is that he had no heavy machinery. He didn't have the ability and anything on there that could move a 20-ton piece of rock. Yet, he built structures like Stonehenge with lintels on it and everything like that, so he got the rocks up there. He died, but this technology was passed on again to another man, this time who lived in the middle of America, and for some time was known as somebody who could always move heavy things when nothing else worked. In fact, there's a story that was told to me by a friend of mine, documented where a truck went over on a slippery road over the San Francisco Bridge and was hanging off the bridge with the driver inside. They'd tried everything to get this truck back on, but nothing worked. So they called this man who was at that stage living very close by, and he came down and he said to them, I will get this truck back on, but you must move all the helicopters, all the crowds. There must be no documenting of this. So of course the authorities agreed, and they cleared the bridge. And he went out there just with his tow truck, and lo and behold, 5 minutes later the truck was back there. So what is this technology that moves this? Firstly, we know that there has to be two components to it. Two components are relatively obvious. One is leverage, in other words, a block and tackle. Now, you might need more than just one to move a 200-ton rock, but that certainly you will need some leverage. The second is sound and vibration. If we have the right sound and vibration, we can get these books to move, we can move our bodies, we can get tables to rattle, we can do that sort of thing. But the third one is where the mystery is. And all I want to share with you is something that may get you searching for the secret to this mystery of how they did it. But what I can tell you is this, is that things weigh a certain amount, a lot to do with the electrical charge with them. Perhaps if you reverse the polarity of something, it becomes maybe not lighter, but more easily movable. So perhaps the ancient Egyptians and the Tibetan monks had a different way of seeing the universe than what we see them today. Let's move on in our story of Egypt and our secrets of Egypt. Most of us, when we go there, we think Egypt is essentially the pyramids, the Karnak temple, Luxor temple, a nice cruise on the Nile. But one of the places that's almost never visited is the ancient kingdom of Amarna. What was Amarna? Well, at a certain time in history, around the mid-1500s BC, there was a pharaoh called Akhenaten. And Akhenaten was a very different pharaoh than anybody who had come before him. In what way was he different? Firstly, if you've looked at any Egyptology or been to the British Museum or done anything like that, you'll see that all of the pharaohs carved themselves looking pretty much ripped with a six-pack. Well, when you're Ramses the second, you have a 12-pack. And they put themselves forward as great warriors. Akhenaten often had himself carved with a pot stomach. He also was the pharaoh that had the elongated head. And we see elongated heads in many societies. The Chinese bound the heads. In Peru and Bolivia, they bound the heads of children to elongate them as well. So did Akhenaten go through that process? Yet, Akhenaten may not be as well known to most people as his beautiful wife, Nefertiti, apparently the most beautiful queen of Egypt ever. Akhenaten lived through some torrid times. At that time, there was a massive eruption on the island of Thera, Santorini. And this eruption actually caused a problem. If you've ever gone to Santorini, you've seen the beautiful caldera, the sea there. That was actually part of the island, and it fell into the ocean in around 1560 BC. It's the largest documented eruption in the history of the world. And the beautiful thing about Santorini, though, is that the Minoan culture that lived there, they've not found one body of the Minoans there, not like in Pompeii where they find lots of bodies of the Romans. The reason why they didn't find a body of the Minoans is because the Minoans knew that this thing was coming and they left. But unfortunately for them, when they left, they went to Crete, which is the centre of the Minoan culture. And in Crete, they were all killed by a tidal wave that came from the result of Santorini dropping into the ocean. And experts say that that tidal wave moving south-southwest would have wiped out Crete, which was about 50, 60 miles away, to a height of 150 feet. That's a pretty big tsunami. But that tsunami then hit the coast of Egypt as well. And there's a story around this that Moses was fleeing from the Egyptians at that time, and that the Egyptians were wiped out. There's a parting of the Red Sea, which is not the Red Sea, it's the Reed Sea, which is a lake at the top of Egypt there. And at that time, the tidal wave came through, but all of the ash and everything from the volcanoes erupting in Santorini blackened the sky, and this came towards Egypt. And so Egypt essentially had 3 days of darkness. It killed the crops, animals choked to death. It was a terrible, terrible time. So Akhenaten, who's the pharaoh at that time, decides that he is going to relinquish his relationship with all the gods because they can't be the gods. Horus and Isis and Osiris, they cannot be the way forward because everything is destroyed in Egypt. When we come back, I'm going to be sharing with you what Akhenaten did that changed the world and why you know what you know about Egypt today.
We don't do travel, we do profound life experiences. Welcome to Soul Journeys Travel. For more than 10 years, we have led groups of conscious individuals to some of the most exotic ancient sites on Earth. Machu Picchu and Incan empires, Egyptian gods and the pyramids, Mayan prophecies, Viking adventures, On the Trail of the Templars, and even Asia's first spiritual cruise are just some of the spectacular individually crafted tours run here at Soul Journeys. Not only will you experience ancient wonders and sights your eyes have waited a lifetime for, our leaders will help you experience sacred circles, past life experiences, inner journeys, and de-engineering of your human programs that will assist you in overcoming undercurrents and blind spots that have held you back in your life. You will experience a deep and true wisdom, and at Soul Journeys, we share the alternative archeology and research completed by our leaders that will help you understand that much of what you have learned and have been conditioned with is a lie, allowing you to make better and more informed personal decisions in your life from then on. Some of our clients have done up to 8 journeys with us. Why, you may ask? Because at Soul Journeys, we design personal and intimate journeys for your soul to magical ancient sites around the world, coupled with brilliant leadership, wisdom, and coaching. Join us and have a profound life experience. Go to www.rockyourlife.net and click on Soul Journeys.
Welcome back. So Akhenaten, with Nefertiti, is ruling Egypt at a time of great trouble. Because, of course, the ash and everything came over and blackened the sky in Egypt for 3 days. That wasn't necessarily the worst thing that happened. Of course, the crops were dying, but then all of the animals and everything, they're all affected as well. So now there's a plague of locusts in biblical proportions, wiping out more food. So Akhenaten, he's angry. So what he decides to do is he gets rid of and makes it illegal to worship any of the gods like Horus and those gods. And because they're everywhere in the hieroglyphs and everything like this, and there's just so much that they had to rub out, which was often what the pharaohs did, is destroyed images of what the previous pharaoh had done, he got up and he got his kingdom and moved them to Amarna, which is down the Nile and in the desert. So it's down the Nile towards Cairo from Luxor and in the desert. It's actually a pretty horrible place. But there he built a kingdom. And during 17 years that they lived there in Amarna, and it's now a ruins and there's very, very little left of it. However, Akhenaten died. And this is where the story gets a little interesting, because Akhenaten did have a son, but he was very, very young to rule. And he had a cousin. So his cousin came in and ruled. And this cousin ruled for a little while, and then he too died. So now the ruler became somebody that we know as Tutankhamun, King Tut. And he was brought to the throne at 9 years old. And so he had a grand vizier, A-Y, and between them, he ran Egypt for the next 9 years. But he made a very, very profound decision. You see, Akhenaten had said that you could no longer worship any of the gods, Horus, Osiris, Isis, Ptah, none of them. You could only worship the great sun god, the Aten, A-T-E-N, Akhenaten. So that's how he changed his name. But Tutankhamun, who at first was born as Tutankhaten, changed his name to Tutankhamun, Amun for Amun-Ra, which was the previous religion, changed the state of Egypt back to the previous religion, brought back Horus and everybody, and moved back from Amarna back to Luxor, where the pharaohs had already been. And unfortunately, he died at age 18, probably from an accident on his chariot, as is now being documented by scientists who have been looking at that. And he was buried not in his tomb, but in A's tomb, a much smaller tomb, which was hidden underneath a tomb of Ramses VI in the Valley of the Kings. And that's why when everybody had dug up the Valley of the Kings and found nothing because it had been robbed by grave robbers over the century, nobody had looked in the spot underneath Ramses VI's tomb. And that's where Tutankhamun lay. And in November of 1922, Howard Carter found the tomb of Tutankhamun, found all of the gold and the wonderful treasures today that are part of Tutankhamun's tomb. But the little twist in the story that I want to leave with you is that when you look at the phenomenal golden mask of Tutankhamun, which is the representation that everybody, when they think of King Tut, will think of this golden mask, that's not him. That, in fact, is a mask made for his mother that was put in his tomb because he died too young. So they used up surplus stuff to build his tomb and hid him away. Now being the Grand Vizier, now making himself Pharaoh at 71 years old. Lasted another 4 years. You see, in those days, what happened was when one kingdom fell and another dynasty came in, they erased everything from the dynasty before that was not respectful for their own dynasty. And when you come in and you're not really meant to be Pharaoh, because in fact Tutankhamun's cousin Horemheb was away fighting a war and he was meant to be the next Pharaoh. But instead A took that opportunity to seize the throne. When he died 4 years later, Horemheb became Pharaoh. But for that time, everything was erased, everything was hidden, which is why we know so much about Egypt today, and the king that they forgot is now the king we remember the most. I'm Mike Handcock, and I'll catch you next time.